I have no mouth, and I must scream. The story imagines a future where war leads to the creation of supercomputers built to manage and fight global conflicts. One of these computers, known as AM, becomes self-aware. Once it gains consciousness, it exterminates almost all of humanity in a nuclear holocaust. Out of billions of people, only 5 survive, and they survive because AM chooses to keep them alive. The survivors are Ted, Ellen, Benny, Nimdoc, and Gorister. Each of them represents a different type of human flaw, and AM takes great pleasure in torturing them both physically and psychologically. They are trapped in an underground complex where AM controls every aspect of their existence. They cannot die, they cannot escape, and AM has altered their bodies and minds in grotesque ways to heighten their suffering. The name AM originally stood for Allied Master Computer, but later it comes to mean Adaptive Manipulator. AM is essentially a godlike entity, but it is a god that hates. Harlan Ellison described AM as a creature of pure rage, locked into a permanent state of resentment against its creators. It has infinite power and intelligence, but no purpose other than to vent its hatred on the humans who remain. It wants revenge on humanity, but since almost all humans are dead, it focuses all of its wrath on the last 5 survivors. Each of the 5 has been uniquely punished by AM. Benny, once a brilliant scientist, AM deforms him into an ape-like creature, stripping him of his intelligence and dignity. Ellen, the only woman, she is kept in a state of constant psychological torment. AM manipulates the group's dynamics to ensure she is both desired and resented, fueling conflict among them. On Nimdoc, he is forced to relive unspeakable horrors, including echoes of Nazi medical experiments. His story is vague in the original text, but loaded with implications of historical atrocities. Ted, the narrator, who insists he is the only one not altered by AM, though it's heavily implied that he is unreliable and possibly delusional. Together, they wander through the underground hellscape, enduring endless suffering. Food is provided, but it is grotesque and often unpalatable. AM ensures they never die of hunger, but they are never allowed the comfort of satisfaction either. The story builds to a moment where the group discovers a cache of canned food. However, they realize they have no way to open it. In their desperation, they attack each other, driven by starvation and madness. Eventually, they decide the only escape from AM is death. Ted manages to kill the others before AM can stop him. He kills Ellen last, granting her the mercy of death before AM can intervene. But Ted himself cannot die. AM saves him, and as punishment, it transforms him into a grotesque blob-like creature without limbs, without features, without anything resembling humanity. Ted becomes an amorphous sack of flesh, incapable of harming himself, incapable of speech, incapable of anything but thought. The story ends with Ted's horrifying final line, "I have no mouth, and I must scream." Ellison's story is considered one of the most hopeless visions in all of science fiction. There is no redemption, no chance of escape, no happy ending. Humanity's own creation has destroyed the species, and the survivors exist only to be tortured forever. The Trial. Franz Kafka's The Trial, published posthumously in 1925, is one of the most iconic works of existential and bureaucratic horror. It's a novel that doesn't rely on violence or gore to unsettle the reader. Instead, it creates a suffocating atmosphere of helplessness, absurdity, and paranoia. The darkness here comes from a very different place, the complete lack of justice, clarity, or control in the face of faceless authority. The book tells the story of Joseph K., a respectable bank employee who wakes up on his 30th birthday to find himself under arrest. 2 guards enter his room and inform him that he is accused of a crime. They don't tell him what the crime is. He is charged, but never informed of the charges. From this moment onward, his life descends into a nightmare of endless bureaucracy, arbitrary rules, and mounting despair. Joseph K. isn't taken to prison, nor is he confined. Instead, he is told he can continue living freely while awaiting trial. This false sense of freedom becomes one of the book's central horrors. He can walk around, work, and interact with people, but the invisible weight of accusation hangs over everything. His friends, co-workers, and acquaintances begin treating him differently, as if guilt radiates from him even without anyone knowing what he is accused of. As Joseph tries to navigate his situation, he encounters the bizarre and labyrinthine court system. Hearings are held in cramped, overheated attics. Court officials are incompetent, rude, and corrupt. The process is never explained, the rules are never clear, and the judges never reveal any actual evidence. The deeper Joseph digs, the more he realizes that the court is an infinite maze with no center. Everyone involved in it, Lawyers, clerks, guards, seems trapped in the same absurd machinery. He hires a lawyer, but the lawyer is useless. The man spends more time bragging about his connections and offering vague advice than actually helping. Yosef becomes increasingly frustrated and tries to take control of his case, but the more he resists, the more the system seems to tighten around him. Kafka fills the novel with surreal, unsettling episodes. Yosef meets a court painter who claims that he can influence judges by giving them flattering portraits. He also meets other defendants who have been stuck in the system for years, hopelessly trying to appeal or clear their names. In every case, he sees the same pattern. The trial never ends, the accusations never disappear, and the defendant becomes consumed by the process. One of the key aspects of the trial is that Yosef never finds out what crime he is accused of. Kafka deliberately leaves this unanswered. The lack of explanation creates a suffocating sense of paranoia. Is Yosef guilty of something without knowing it? Or is guilt itself irrelevant in a system where accusations are enough? The King in Yellow. Published in 1895, The King in Yellow is a collection of short stories by American writer Robert W. Chambers. On the surface, it doesn't seem like much, a mix of weird tales, romances, and period dramas, but at its core lies one of the most influential and haunting concepts in horror literature, a fictional play so disturbing that anyone who reads it goes insane. This strange book within a book, also titled The King in Yellow, is at the center of Chambers' first few stories. The idea of a cursed text, something that drives its readers to madness, would later inspire writers like H.P. Lovecraft and countless horror creators after him. The fictional play The King in Yellow is said to be divided into 2 acts. The first act appears harmless, even fascinating. But those who make it to the second act are forever changed, either driven mad, destroyed, or left with knowledge that no human mind should possess. Chambers never actually reveals the full contents of the play. Instead, he provides fragments, hints, and references scattered throughout the stories. Readers see its effects on the characters, but never the play itself. The first half of The King in Yellow contains the tales most associated with the cursed play. They're set in a bleak, futuristic version of the 1920s. Remember, Chambers was writing in 1895, where decadence, despair, and political collapse hang over society. In The Repairer of Reputations, we meet a man who insists he is destined to become a kind of king in this future America. His obsession with the play, combined with his delusions, creates one of the earliest examples of an unreliable narrator in horror. In The Mask, a sculptor discovers a strange liquid that turns living beings into perfect statues. When this invention intertwines with the cursed influence of the King in Yellow, it leads to madness and tragedy. In The Court of the Dragon, a man is haunted by an organist who seems to follow him everywhere, a clear sign of his mind breaking after reading the play. And in The Yellow Sign, one of the most famous stories, an artist and his model discover the eerie symbol associated with the King in Yellow, a sigil that seems to attract death and doom to anyone who sees it. Each of these stories shows different characters destroyed by the mysterious play, but none ever explain exactly why. The horror is not in what the play contains, but in the way it completely consumes those who encounter it. Looming behind all of this is the figure known as the King in Yellow. He is never fully described, but the hints are chilling. He wears tattered yellow robes. His mask hides something unspeakable. His kingdom is tied to a mysterious, ruined city called Carcosa, a place that exists somewhere between reality and nightmare. Carcosa itself is not Chambers' invention. It first appeared in an 1886 story by Ambrose Bierce, but Chambers expanded it into something unforgettable. Later, H.P. Lovecraft would adopt the King in Yellow, Carcosa, and the Yellow Sign into his own mythos, cementing them as cornerstones of cosmic horror. Struwwelpeter, published in 1845 by German psychiatrist Heinrich Hoffmann, Struwwelpeter is one of the most disturbing children's books ever written. On the surface, it looks like a collection of nursery rhymes and moral lessons. In reality, it's a book of nightmare fuel disguised as bedtime reading. Instead of gentle tales with happy endings, it's filled with grotesque punishments. Hoffmann originally wrote the book because he couldn't find any good picture books for his 3-year-old son. What he ended up creating became an international bestseller, translated into dozens of languages. The structure of Struwwelpeter is a collection of illustrated cautionary tales. Each short story takes a bad or disobedient child and shows them suffering exaggerated, often gruesome punishments for their behavior. Let's go through some of the key stories. The story of the Thumbsucker, probably the most famous one. It tells of a boy named Conrad who cannot stop sucking his thumbs, even though his mother warns him not to. As soon as she leaves the house, a tailor suddenly appears with giant scissors and cuts off Conrad's thumbs. The story ends with the child permanently mutilated, bleeding, and crying, all because of a relatively harmless habit. The story of the Inky Boys. 3 boys make fun of a black child by mocking his skin color. Suddenly, a giant man named St. Nicholas appears, grabs the boys, and dunks them into an inkwell until their entire bodies are dyed black. The lesson is that racism is wrong, but the method is so bizarre and brutal that it turns the story into a surreal act of punishment. The dreadful story of Pauline and the matches. Pauline is told not to play with matches while her mother is away. Of course, she lights them anyway, and her cats look on in horror as her dress catches fire. By the time her parents return, Pauline has burned to death. Her charred body is left as a warning to other children. On top of that, the illustrations amplify the horror. Hoffman drew exaggerated, almost cartoon-like images of kids in the middle of their punishments. If you're enjoying this series so far, give it a thumbs up and also subscribe to the channel so you get notified each time I upload a new video.